We have had virtually no repair costs on robots because we're not really harsh on them. We don't have the sand. So we have 4 Lely robots and we milk about 220 cows on them. We do a low calcium dry cow diet for them. So it's corn, silage, and straw pretty much. So when they get into the milking barn and they see a freestall, they know how to utilize it. When we need to lock them up for any type of purpose, health treatment wise, they know how to use a headlock, that sort of thing. So
welcome everybody. Today we're at K&K Dairy Farm, and I am really pleased to do this because Christy was in my class 14 years ago, and now she's doing a great job with this dairy of 200 cows and a robotic milker.
So welcome, and I hope that you enjoyed this video.
Yeah, so we actually used to milk almost 500 cows traditionally in a double 10 parallel parlor here. And about 3 years ago we switched over to Lely robots. So we have 4 Lely robots and we milk about 220 cows on them. So primarily Holstein, we have a few brown Swiss mixed into the herd. So bulk tanks and everything still are right here in the milk house, the old milk house. And we pipe all the milk from the robots back up to this old milk house here. So you can kind of see the pipeline over here. We have a little office in here, just has the computer and the stuff for the Lely robots in there.
So how many cows?
So we milk about 220 cows.
220.
Yep.
4 robots?
4 robots, yep.
And what's your production at, or?
So we're sitting.
Is that an important issue? Or?
So we're sitting right about 80 pounds. We do have some issues going on right now with feed and some other things. We're actually doing a little bit of a study on potential salmonella problem that we have. So that has been a little bit of an issue for us, and we're working through that. We were previous to that, we were at about 95 pounds of milk. So we know this is a struggle for us right now. So this was just a freestall barn that we converted into the robot. So we just added right onto the end of it and plopped our robots in here. So you'll see kind of the old portion of the barn and the new portion. Still have the headlocks, although we don't use them anymore. We have the feed bar here, and then these 2 headlock systems here are where we do all of our treating, preg checking, everything like that, because that's where we sort the animals into. So you can kind of see there's gates here and there's gates back there. We make a nice little sorting pen. We can lock them up, we can check them, that sort of thing. So
Do you change your TMR to try to account for the fact that they're going to leave some of that?
we do, yep. And I think that's what our struggle's been, is trying to find the optimal, because the other thing with robots that's really hard is trying to play with that TMR versus the pellet thing. Right now we pulled a little bit of energy out to try to get more visits through the robot, but with that I think we pulled a little too much energy out, and that's why the cows aren't producing much. So we're gonna put more energy back in, but hopefully not too much to where we lose visits. So it's that really big balancing act.
And you play with starch and some non-forage fiber sources, like soy hulls or something? Or?
Yep, so right now we don't have, we have a little bit of soy hulls in, not enough to really say so, but we will play with that a little bit. We use soybean meal, so it's just corn silage, high moisture corn, which I think is a little bit of our problem, to be honest with you. I don't think a robot herd in high moisture corn is maybe the best fit.
Yeah.
So we're looking at maybe next year going to something a little bit different to try to really reduce that big energy punch that we're kind of getting with that high moisture corn.
And the robot, how much are you feeding in the robot then?
So I think we average about 13 pounds of pellet through the robot.
And the pellet is what?
It's a mixture. We've got some protein source in there, some energy source in there.
Starch, you mean?
Starch, yep.
So that starch would be, because it's a pellet, it's probably fermented pretty fast.
Yeah, very fast starch. And then you got high moisture corn that's fast starch, and you just got a lot of too much of that fast.
I would be bumping up the soy hulls.
Fill them up a little bit.
Well, soy hulls has pretty good energy too.
Yep.
And it's not going to be fermented and drop rumen pH as much.
Okay. Yep.
You might also consider doing that with your pellet.
Yeah, putting a little more soy hulls in there. Yep. I know we have to use a certain amount to get a the
Give
right
cows-
pellet, right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise that pellet gets really
And soils
smushy on us.
it can
so.
fall apart, yeah.
Yep. So this Lely robot here, Juno, he'll push up feed about every hour and a half, and it has a sensor that will kind of tell him where the feed is in the bunk and how close to get to the bunk to push it back up to the cows.
How many orts do you, what percent overage do you feed every day?
So we try, so we have all of our own heifers here. So, 10% isn't terribly uncommon for us because we will feed it back out to the heifers. Yep. If we didn't have them there, it'd probably be a different story, but yep. We found robot cows are just a whole different way of feeding. They kind of do their own thing. We found that because of our size of our mixer wagon, we have to make 2 batches. And we just found it worked a little bit better to wait and make that second batch until a little bit later, and then kind of force them all to come up again, get a little more bite to eat and things like that. We don't, because there's no parlor, there's not that like forced time to eat, right, when you come back from a parlor. So we kind of had to make some adjustments, play with that a little bit. So that was a little bit tricky, but I think we've got that down a little better now. So.
And what different technology that you use here? It's collars and there's something to heat stress?
Yes. So all the collars you see on the cows here, they are all going back to the computer system, and then they work with the robot system as well. And so the data that we get off of that is we get rumination data. We get all of the data through the robot off that. So milk temperature, pounds of milk. We get all sorts of heat information as well, so pedometer type information from it too. So the collars were a big learning curve for us because previous to that we didn't have anything. So it was kind of a flood of information, which I think was a little bit harder for us to manage as people, just how we take that information and we utilize it into something practical for us.
And about reproduction, do you watch some information in the collars to?
Absolutely, yeah. We've gone a little bit away from timed AI per se, and we do a lot more off the collar breeding. So that's been a nice addition when we put the robots in too. So yeah.
What, you just talking about breeding? I didn't hear that.
Yeah. So
do you do timed AI or?
So we do a little timed AI, but I was telling him we went away from so much timed AI when we got the collars, and we do a little bit more off the pedometer type information. I was telling him that was probably one of our biggest learning curves going on the robot. We didn't have any collar system or anything going into them. So putting these collars on, we have rumination, we have pedometer, we have about everything you can want, and it was more so from a people standpoint, was learning, okay, I have all this information, what do I do with it? How do I utilize it to where it's actual useful information? So I think we've got that down pretty good now. I would say one of the things we use is rumination the most.
For breeding? Or for just looking
for
at...
like health, things like that.
Yep. So, but for, it tells you between rumination and pedometer, you get all that stuff together, you have pretty good idea when to breed the cow.
Yes.
What percent of your cows do you breed that way?
So we're up over 60% right now that we're breeding off of the collar. It took us a little bit to get to that point, just because we weren't exactly sure, we weren't real comfortable with the pedometers, the breeder wasn't real comfortable. But once we really hound in on that data, we've actually we'll breed a little bit earlier on when we see, so if we put them all originally on a timed AI program. So when they come in, they get on a timed AI program, but we'll breed prior to that actual finishing that timed AI. So we'll pick up a heat earlier and we'll breed off of that heat. And we've been really successful doing that. It seems like that first heat that comes on is one of the better ones to breed off of. So they catch a little bit better.
So how many days do you wait before you breed?
I think we bumped that a little bit earlier. We're to 60 now. We were sitting at 70. We bumped it back to 60. We found that it's better to breed these robot cows a little bit faster. Just because they seem to go through a little bit faster on robots. It seems like our peaks don't, go as long as we would like them. And I think that might be something we need to try and figure out a little bit too. So we found getting them bred a little bit earlier. We weren't having cows that were dropping off on milk way late lactation. So
Your robot, do you have ability to feed more than one grain mix or just one grain mix?
we don't. We just went with one grain mix. Yep. It would be nice to have two. I've seen a lot of places where I'd like to put something a little bit in there for the later lactation animals that wasn't so potent, didn't have all the goodies in it. Yeah.
So and about the barn, you know the size of the barn, how many beds they have?
I don't. That would be my husband's question.
No problem. But there's sprinklers.
Nope. That is one thing we are very deficient on in this barn is heat abatement, and we definitely see that going into the summertime. We really get affected by that. So that is on our list of things to do next year. Definitely install more fans. We would like more fans actually up around the robots because we don't have any up here, and we think that might be a little bit of a deterrent. And then we've talked about a sprinkler system or something to kind of help with that. We used to have it in the holding pen when we milked in the parlor. That was our heat abatement, was in the holding pen. But here we don't have anything, so it's definitely on our list of things to do next spring for sure.
The barn is 211 feet long. Is that what you wanted to know?
And about what's the frequency of the milking?
Yep. So we sit right around that 2.8 milkings. And obviously that changes. My later lactation cows, they don't go that much. We try to let our early lactation cows go almost as much as they want until they hit that 15 to 20 days. So you'll see some of those up around that 4.4 milkings per day too. But we average right around that 2.8. So the beds we have are actually mattresses. We have 2 barns, and you'll see the other barn is full of heifers, and that's sand. And we had a big decision to make when we were putting these robots in, was which barn do we go with. This barn just made more sense logistically to be able to pipe the milk back to the milk house, things like that. As for actual barn with mattresses, I probably would have preferred sand. The mattresses are maybe a little more harsh on the cows. I do think we tend to lose a little bit of milk there. But one thing we do gain is with the robots, the sand is really harsh on the robots and all the parts that go with it. We have had virtually no repair costs on robots because we're not really harsh on them. We don't have the sand. So I think it's a give and take, right? There's good things, there's bad things. For cow comfort, definitely sand. In this barn, we just happen to have the mattresses, so that's kind of what we've gone with. So the other thing that plays, I guess, a factor that too is that our manure pit is set up for sawdust only. The one over there is set up for sand. So we do not have a lined manure pit, so we are not able to use the sand because we can't scoop it out. So that's also the reason we have the mats in here. We utilize lime on the mats twice a day. So when we scrape twice a day, we put lime down on top of the mats to kind of keep some of the bacteria at bay.
Do you have some case with about HBS? You know HBS?
Yeah, we have not had any here. We've tested once or twice, but it's not been a concern for our cows. So.
Do you use beef on dairy here or not?
Not much. We've done a little bit of it. We only really utilize it for like a hard breeder or something like that. But we actually raise all of our own bull calves, and we have a whole nother farm where we raise beef at. And we've just found in our beef system that the Holstein steer fits a lot better, so we've just bred conventional.
And about the genetics, could you talk a little bit?
Yeah, so we're not a super high genetic type herd. Some of the things that we look for in our herd goes kind of back to the robots. So teat placement, making sure we have the right teats for the robot is really important. Other than that, we're just kind of the general cow, a more commercial type cow here, so we don't really play a lot into the genetics here, but we have decent cows and that sort. So.
And about the robot, they have a camera, laser, how they identify the
Yes, so there is a laser on the arm, and that laser finds the teats and hooks it up. So there's also cameras up above the cow that kind of shows the robot where the cow is, so if she's moving back and forth, the arm will follow that cow back and forth as well.
Good.
If you guys want, we can go inside the robot room and I can kind of show you what they do inside. Excuse me, girls. Excuse me. Come on, girls. Come on. Come on, girls. Come on. Hey, watch out, girls. We had to install the gate And then the lock, because the cows were beating our doors up. So what this does is it, in Michigan, we're required to brush twice. So it has a sanitizer on it, and it brushes the teats off. It swings back out, sanitizes again, goes back in and brushes again, and then it actually dries. So it shoots air up to the teat and dries the teat off before it goes and hooks up. Then it will use a laser to find the teats and hook up the cups that way.
How much costs to implement this robot here?
I don't exactly remember, but the robots are a pretty hefty cost. What we ended up doing, we had the option to a lease to buy program. And kind of what we were explained is that these robots are like your cell phone, right? And after a few years, the new one comes out. The new one has a lot better technology. And so they said the lease to own option, after you're done with your lease, you have the option to upgrade to the new robot. And so we went with that option after some friends of ours did that. They had their robots for 8 years, decided the new one came out, they really liked the new ones, so they pulled the old ones out and put new ones in. So that's kind of what our option was. So we kind of have like a cell phone. You pay and lease it, and then, you know, at the end when there's a new phone, you can upgrade. So that's kind of what our program is. So, yep.
And what's the secret to the robot? What you need to focus to have a good milk production?
Yeah. So robots are tricky. The nutrition is really important because you have the pellet and then you have the PMR, so you have the bunk mix. Trying to get that really honed in so you have the right protein, the right starch, the right energy, that's really tricky. The other thing is we learned early on, let cows be cows. We were in this barn a lot, we were fetching a lot, and we finally were like, let's let the cows do it, let's see what they can do. The more we're not in the barn, actually the better they are. They'll go a lot more, and they're just a lot more efficient without us in here. So we try to get everything done, within a few hours in the morning, and then back away and let the cows be cows.
And this is a guided system?
Nope.
Or free flow?
This is free flow system. Yep, cows come when they want. Yep. So this cow, it wasn't her time to milk, so the computer system sets them up on all sorts of things. So their lactation curve, how much milk production they have, things like that. And it lets them know when they can and cannot come to the robot. And so their collar will sense, are you ready or are you not ready? And it will kick them out when they're not ready. So the computer will show you kind of everything that's going on here too. So we have like her number, her lactation, how many days in she is, how many pellets she's getting, how long it takes her to milk. And then it will show me, once it gets up and going, milk production per individual teat. And then it will also, it takes off the quarters according to their milk production, which is really nice. One of the things we're noticing now that we've been in it for a while, our teat ends are just phenomenal. I mean, looks like the day they calved in. They are phenomenal teat ends. So that's one benefit here. We definitely are not over milking. We're keeping cows a lot longer. So one of the things we were told originally was that black teats can sometimes be a problem because the laser can't sense them real well. But we have a handful of cows with black teats, and they've done fairly well so far. So we've been real happy with that.
The milk replacer or?
Yep, we are all milk replacer. We feed a 2220 milk replacer. We've been on that for many years, and we've tried a few things and kind of fallen on our faces, and so we do the milk replacer. I can show you our mixer too. We've got kind of a nice setup
you do
for
something
that.
different for winter versus summer?
Nope. And we're 2 times a day, 3 quarts twice a day is all we do for calves. So 6 quarts a day. Yep. So this is kind of our system that we have set up. It's just a really nice, simple system so that it's the same every time we feed. So we have a little chart up here for how many water gallons per calf. We measure it out with a little meter. So we just turn the hose on, measure that out, and then we weigh all of our milk replacer with a hanging scale and a bucket. And we have a little chart over there of how many pounds of powder per calf. Mix it up, and then we bucket feed everything out here in the hutches. So,
Who takes care of that?
so we have a Hispanic fella that actually scrapes the barn twice a day, and he feeds calves twice a day. So it fits real nice with that scraping system too. Yeah.
Does he do something? How does he monitor health, or does he have things
Yep.
that he's supposed to check every day?
Yep. So, I mean, we're pretty simple. This is kind of how many calves are on milk and water. And then if he has sick ones, he writes them down here. My husband does all the herd health stuff. So when he sees a sick calf on here, he'll go out and evaluate what needs to happen, if it gets a treatment of some sort or whatnot. So, yep.
Simple is good.
Simple, of
Simple
course.
is good. Yep. We also have this here. I know it's very weird looking. This is a picture of our maternity pen setup. And if there is a calf in there, we do the calf's number. And then these tally marks are how many colostrum feedings they've got, to just make sure we get the colostrum feedings into them. So once again, real simple. Nobody can take a calf out of that maternity pen until it's got all of its colostrum feedings, and then it can come out here to the hutch. So.
How quickly do they usually get colostrum?
So that's one thing that with the robots has been a really big learning curve for us, and we're still really trying to get our head wrapped around it. Being the 500 cows, you used to have a person out here 24/7. We milked 3 times a day. There was just always someone taking care of maternity. We don't have that anymore. When we're done for the day, we all go inside, we go to bed. There's nobody out here with the cows. So we've really been struggling with that. Sometimes it can be, if they calve at 8 o'clock at night, they're not getting colostrum until like 4 o'clock the next morning. So
Yeah.
it can be a while. That's been tough on us to try to adapt to that. We are rearranging our calving. So we used to do calve on time. If you'd see feet, if you would see, the signs of calving, we'd put them in a maternity pen and they'd calve in there. Obviously not having people around, that's not working. So we are putting a bed pack in. So we'll have an area where they can calve on a bed pack. Because right now it was all sand stalls, and they'll calve in the middle of the night in, an alleyway or something. That doesn't work. So, we've just really been playing around with how to get that to fit our system now. So, yep, that's been tricky. Yep.
Yeah, the things that one of the advantages of a big dairy is
Yes.
you have people there watching cows
Yep.
all the time. Yeah.
Yep.
That's okay.
Yep. Things that we went to this system, and the reason we went here was labor. We had about 15 to 16 people on staff, and we would be 2 to 3 people short at any given time. So it was really difficult on us just trying to fill in and make sure we had people where we needed people. So we went to this system to reduce labor, which helped. But also there's things that we didn't realize that labor was really nice for, and now we don't have that option. So just kind of training ourselves on how we're going to do things with this system without labor that still works for the cows and calves and all that good stuff.
So you feed 6 quarts a day. How long have you been doing that?
We've been doing that since well before we were on the parlor over there. So many, many years we've been doing that.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's good. So
Yep.
6 quarts a day gives you a lot nicer gain
Yes.
on those calves.
Yep.
Which is, all the data says the time to get more gain is when they're calves, not
Yep.
over heifers. So
Yep. Yep.
Good.
Cool.
And about the colostrum, you said something or not?
2 feedings, right?
Yes,
Two
2 feedings of
feedings.
colostrum. Yep. And we do, I think what this is. So 2 liters, 6 pints of colostrum for 2 feedings.
Yes, that's
Yep.
3.
3 quarts. Yes, sorry, 3 quarts. 2 feedings, 3 quarts of colostrum before they can go out to the hutch. And that's kind of our rule.
Yes, test colostrum.
We used to. So our bigger focus has always been making sure that maternal colostrum goes to that calf. And we've seen better success doing that. When we were testing colostrum before, we were hitting 30 on the colostrometer all the time. It was very rare you would hit anything lower than that. So we stop testing, and then we just make sure that mom's colostrum goes to that specific calf, and we've been doing pretty good doing that system. So
You storage some colostrum in freezer or something like
we
that?
do. Yep. We just use Ziploc bags. So yep. Yep. It's rare that we have to use that colostrum. Most of the time when we milk the mom, she's got plenty of colostrum. Feed to that calf, we don't usually have problems with that. So, yep.
Do you know the numbers of diarrhea and diet or death?
I don't. It's very rare. That's one thing with just a very consistent calf program that we found is that we rarely have issues. If we do, we kind of know about them ahead of time. Something was maybe not quite right with the calf when she was born, things like that. But no, it's very rare that we have any issues in the calf program here. If it is, it's a little bit of diarrhea here and there. We're pretty good at treating that with some electrolytes in between our feedings of milk. So.
Okay, you just focus on the bedding is dry and clean, and put the colostrum and the milk replacer.
Yep. Yep.
Good. It's simple.
Simple. Yep. That's what we found. Simple is better here.
Yeah.
For sure. I worked for NRV many years ago. They're a milk replacer company mainly out of Canada, but they have a branch out of Wisconsin. And so I still have some connections with the guy, and he brings me a load of milk replacer a couple times a month. So this is by far, we've used other stuff. We've gone through some issues with other stuff. We seem to get some more diarrhea and some other things. So we pretty much just won't go away from this milk replacer. Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about the starch grain?
Yeah, so our calf grain, we use a 20% calf grain, texturized. It's a pretty simple grain. It's got a little molasses in it. Just something to get the calves started on. We don't push it too terribly hard until they're like midway through the hutch process, and then we try to push it a little bit harder. We want to make sure they're eating, we always say a full pail because that's just what the guys are going to know, right? But we believe the full pail is right around 2 pounds, so I'd like them to be eating that by the time they're ready for weaning.
This is 2 pounds?
If we get it full, sometimes we'll put...
looks like way more than 2 pounds.
Oh, maybe it is. Maybe it's 4 pounds. It's been a long time since we've done that. So our weaning process is we will take 1 feeding a day away from them for a week. So they'll be on 1 time a day milk for a week, and then we completely wean them after that. But we keep them in the hutches for a week after they are fully weaned before they go into their group housing situation.
I got to do this without spilling. There's no way. This is way more than... Okay, so I bet that... I'm not even going to fill it all up because I know this...
Yeah, it's probably not full.
Because I know that's way more than 2 pounds. Now, I didn't weigh the tail.
I can do it
You should
after
really
you're
do
done.
that.
Yep.
Okay, so...
Oh, 12 pounds. So it's probably more like the pail's a couple pounds, maybe.
Yeah.
More like 10 pounds of grain they're eating.
I can't imagine they're eating that much. So...
So
Couple of pounds?
Couple pounds, yep. So they're eating about 10 pounds. So I was off.
I bet they're not eating that.
So once again, really simple system. We always fill from the youngest. So these will probably be about the oldest up here, and my youngest are going to be in the back. And then as we add hutches, they're just older and older and older, and always clean them out after we're done. So when these guys wean out of here, when they go to the next pen, we clean everything, we scrape the cement, we try to let us always have time for it to dry. So you'll see these areas where we don't have hutches. That's because we want it to dry, get some sunshine before we put the new calves back on it. So
you always have that little strip that just keeps moving.
right, it just keeps moving with us.
So
Yep.
So those are empty, waiting for calves.
Yep.
And then you'll put new calves.
In
And
front. Keep moving, yeah. It's always a moving system. Yep.
Where
The
does the grain
grain's
go?
on the inside.
Okay, so
Yep.
they can't mix water and grain.
Yes, yep. And we always start out with these younger calves of just a little bit of grain. We used to have some employees that would fill it all the way to the top, and then by the time you get to the bottom, it's really gross. So we ate just a couple scoops at a time until they really start eating it, which we found really isn't until midway through their, time on milk, and then we'll start, adding a lot more. So.
And that's already a pound. So.
Yep.
So where do you feed them their milk?
So the milk goes in the same bucket. So what we've kind of learned, or kind of what we think is happening, we'll feed them milk, so we'll dump the water out, we'll feed them milk in that bucket, and then shortly after they've drank all their milk, we come back and we rinse the bucket and we fill it with water, and we think that may help keep some of like the bacteria down, because we do not wash buckets. The only time these buckets get washed are when new calves come in. So once again, a very simple setup. It's not one, I tell some people that it's maybe not how veterinarians would love to see it, right? They'd love to see us clean the buckets every day and all that good stuff. But realistically, this works. And so we just keep going with that situation.
Yeah, and
one thing that's nice though is the water's over there, the feed's in there, so they never make their feed wet. They never get grain in the water. And very clearly calves eat grain better when they don't make it wet, and they drink their water better when they don't get it dirty with grain. So
it's important. And
yep,
good,
definitely.
very good.
Yep.
The folks in the management with 2-4 people.
Yep.
We need to make this happen.
Yep. The one thing we've found too over the years, when we were in the parlor, you could have 4 or 5 different people who would feed calves, because they were different people who would scrape different shifts and things like that. That's when we had a lot more issues. Now we have, so the same guy feeds calves twice a day for 6 days out of the week. And then it's my husband who feeds the calves the other day of the week. So really there's only 2 people feeding these calves. And they just have consistency. So I think that's huge. I think that's really helped. It really cuts down on any issues that we have. So.
Big cat.
Yeah, this is a steer. Yes, it is. This one has grown really fast.
Do you keep all your wool calves?
We do. So we have a beef farm over in Langsburg. And so all of our steers go over to Langsburg. So, yep, we raise them out there.
Very good.
And I was kind of telling him that we have not done the beef on dairy kind of thing because we raise our own. Our steers the barns and stuff are just set up for Holsteins. Our feeding program's set up for Holsteins, so it just fits better for us to have Holstein steers. So every once in a while we will throw, you'll see one right there. Every once in a while we throw an Angus in, and it's more as a cleanup. For a cow that's been bred a few times, we can't get pregnant, we'll throw an Angus as like a cleanup, and they do catch. So nope, just straws of Angus. Yep, everything's AI'd here. Yep.
I didn't know this. The Angus has you get a higher fertility with the Angus semen, you think?
That's what they say, and so far it's kind of proven true to us that if you do throw a beef, an Angus beef semen in, they catch a lot faster and a lot better for us. So
Every farm that we was, they use Angus too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. My husband kept an Angus heifer one time because it was a heifer, and he thought, oh, that'd be fun. We don't recommend doing that. It turned out to be a big, beefy, not milking well animal. So. We got one of these brushes here. A friend gave it to us, and the cows absolutely love it. So now we need to get another one because we don't have one in that pen. So I always feel bad when we put cows over there. They don't have a brush. So.
How this works here, the effluent?
Yeah, so this is mostly So the robots wash, and they have, we dump milk every once in a while from the robots and stuff like that. That all goes into this pit here. But we also scrape from our close-up pen into this pit. So this is just a holding pit that we have to, every 4 months or so, we have to take out to the fields. So, yep. So this used to be a milking cow barn. And so we utilize this barn now for our far off dry cows on one side, and then heifers are on the other side. So, and these are going to be breeding age to bred heifers. So, these are all pregnant cows.
And here don't have the robots to push the feed.
Correct. This one we still do manually with the skid steer. Yep.
You know the frequency?
So we're probably only maybe 4 times a day that we push feed up in here. It's one thing, so they told us that the robot that pushes feed up might actually be able to travel over here and push feed up. So it's something we're going to look into at some point in time, because that would be a time saver for us, for sure.
And you see the difference, the production?
Over there, here, the growth and things like that would be nice. I think we'd see better growth if we could push up a little more frequently to the heifers. Yep.
What's the diet of the heifers?
So the heifers are a lot of push outs from the cows. So whatever's left over there, we'll put in here. And then we just add a little bit of haylage, corn silage, a little bit of straw, and then a mineral. We tried early breeding, but we just didn't feel like when they were calving in that they were mature enough. They weren't making the milk we wanted them to. So we pushed it back a little bit. That 12 month is kind of where we start them at. So.
And then on average they are at 13 months or something like
that?
Yeah,
yep, that's probably right. Yep.
And do you look at height or anything when you breed, or?
Yes, we used to a little bit better in the old barn. So we used to take all of our heifers to another farm before we switched this all up. And over there we actually had markings on some of the rails so that we could, if you're not this height, don't breeder kind of a situation. We haven't done that in a while, and we probably should. But our breeder, so we have a breeder come in and do the breeding for us. He's pretty good on, eyeballing and kind of.
So when you did height, what did you shoot for?
I think we were
50 inches?
50, 52 inches, something like that.
Well, you know what 52 inches is on there?
We could probably find it out and put a mark on it. That's what we did in the old barn, is we measured and put some marks out.
Put marks on those.
We just haven't since we've moved back in here, but.
Came here, you decided you were done doing nutrition work.
So I actually did nutrition work. So my husband and I have owned this for 12 years now. So I did my own for a little while. Yep. There were goods and bads to it. Honestly, in the parlor, it was a lot easier. I enjoyed that. We could sit that 98 pounds of milk, 4 or 5 butter fat. Like, it was super easy, super consistent. We moved into robots, and that was a whole different ball game. It just wasn't as easy anymore. So, all the time. I called him the other day and blamed him. When we hired Nate on, I said, Nate, I'm probably going to be the worst customer you have because I know nutrition too well. Yeah. I was going to go to college for chickens. That was kind of that's where I was going until I met my husband here, who has a dairy farm. Then we switched over to cows. So this used to be our fresh cow barn, and we're converting it over now into our weaned heifer barn. And so all of our heifers will wean from the hutches, and then they'll come over into this barn and work their way through until they get up into breeding age. So
start using freestalls at a young age.
Yeah. That's always fun.
But it's good.
Yep. Yep. We put a little bit of headlocks down here too, so they know how to use headlocks.
Could you tell a little bit more about this, how this help you after in the other barn when they grow?
Yeah. So we've always found kind of training these younger animals to use headlocks and to use freestalls. As they grow, as they become breeding age, and then as they transition into the milking cow, they then know how to use these types of things. So when they get into the milking barn and they see a freestall, they know how to utilize it. When we need to lock them up for any type of purpose, health treatment wise, they know how to use a headlock, that sort of thing. So that's why we kind of implement it in this barn. So we just basically train them.
Okay.
Yep.
And about the robotic milking, how many days to adapt the cows when you change the system? And the first time, remember it's...
Oh, yeah, that was a disaster. So we pushed cows for a week prior to starting on the robot. And that was actually one of the best things that the company ever told us to do. So we just let the robot kind of be open, and all we did was push them through without getting milked or anything. So we got them really used to that, you know, this is the robot, this is what it smells like, this is what it looks like. Before anything touched them or anything milked them or anything like that. So we did that for a week, and then we put them on the robots to be milked that next week. That actually went fairly smooth. We weren't really pushing cows through per se. They were just, you know, kind of walking in and getting milked. We had a fair amount of fetch cows for probably 3 months after we put the robots in. Just the older cows, they just don't get it. Even we have a few older cows in there now that I'm like, you just never took to it. Like you're still a 2 time a day cow because you don't like them. The young cows coming in, you didn't have to touch them. They would fly right through. They'd go on the robot. They'd milk themselves. You don't have to go fetch them or anything. So big learning curve for us and for them. But yeah, it was, we made the mistake of starting in January. It was the coldest time frame, and we were out there pushing cows for weeks and 24/7. For the first week, you're out there 24/7 pushing animals. So we had shifts of people doing it, but that was a very rough few months. Yes. Yep. So these ones have been on TMR for a while, but when we move them from here to here, we actually feed this on top of the TMR to kind of get them going. So
at what age did it start getting the TMR?
I try not to start the TMR until 6 months. That's usually my goal. So.
Have you ever tried earlier?
We've tried.
I've done studies with calves, and I've had TMRs. I've had calves eating TMRs at 12 weeks.
Really? Mm-hmm. We've tried.
Problem.
We just don't see. I mean, our calves just kind of tail off once we go to TMR. So.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I had him gaining faster than I wanted him to gain.
Really?
With the TMR at 12 weeks.
We should probably try to push it, especially in this new barn. We might find something different than than the old barn. And so in the old barn, we were making, I think, too many changes at once because they were coming from one pen pack barn over into a freestall barn, and we were trying to do a TMR at that point. And I think we just threw too much at them. So I think now here, where it's a very much easier transition, we could probably get away with that.
When we did it, we started at 9 weeks. We started with feeding them a TMR with some grain, and then by 12 weeks, that's all they ate was a TMR.
Really?
And from 12 to 24 weeks, I had I had 3 different. I'm trying to remember the study now. I think 4 different groups. But I had a high and a low. My high calves, from 12 weeks to 24 weeks, were gaining 2.5 pounds a day.
Wow.
On a TMR.
That's crazy.
So you can do it.
Yeah. That's a project for Nate. That's what I heard. We cash crop a lot more. So now we kind of have 3 different parts of the operation. Obviously the dairy. We cash crop about 2,000 acres. And then we have our beef side of the operation too. So this was my husband's family farm. Yep, I married in, but yep, this was, I think we are 4th generation on this farm. Actually, so I do have to laugh. The gentleman that owns the other farm that we have the steers at, I don't know if you know the name Kevin Dennis, but he used to go overseas, and he would help. I think he would go to Australia. He'd go a whole bunch of different places and help dairy farmers kind of get their feet under them. So he's kind of a cool guy, but he kind of retired from doing that. He says, I had enough of that. I want to come stay home. And he says, I need a project. And I'm like, okay, you know, what are you thinking? And he says, I think I want to raise chickens. I was like, okay. He is up to 600 laying hens. And he has an egg operation, and he has the whole egg washer. He delivers eggs. It's a whole deal.
Sells locally.
Yep. Kind of a cool little operation. So, yep. So we have 2 bunkers of haylage here, and then a bunker of corn silage over here. Way more corn silage than we need. We still haven't figured out how to adjust that, but we'll get there. Then we keep straw for our close-up ration. We have soybean meal, and then our mix. So definitely old school. It's good and bad. We struggle a little bit when we get to the edges in the back of the bunk. I think sometimes that's just, you know, you got clay bunks, so you get stuff that kind of leaches in and out. We've talked about covering the the outsides, but we just haven't.
You putting a roof over top. Is that what you mean?
Nope. So using plastic to actually cover the sides.
Plastic down this.
Yeah, down like the sides, but we haven't done that. So ignore the signs. So I think he has soybean meal in this one, and then the mix in that one, if I remember correctly. Yep, pretty much just the mineral. Yep. We have a chopper on the baler, so it comes out a little bit chopped because of the baler, but we actually put this into our mixer just like this and run our mixer a little bit longer. Seems to work okay. I'm sure we go through more mixer knives than we need to, but beats having a
and they don't leave
straw grinder.
They eat it with everything else.
Yeah,
you don't put this in the
mainly in our close-up ration.
Okay.
So we do and we haven't looked at the close-up cows. We can look at those. We do a low calcium dry cow diet for them. So it's corn silage and straw pretty much for them when they get up to the close-up stage. So that's where a lot of that will be used. So.
And they're not leaving the straw?
Not really, no. When we process it with the corn silage, it does seem to process pretty well. Probably have the most work to do on our farm would be coming up with a better system here. We have the really old H bunk here with the roof over it. We still feed in. Just a different system here would be a lot more efficient for us. I think better for the cows. And then this is where we still have like the calving problem because we don't have a bedded pack, and sometimes they calve at night and that sort of thing. So this is our biggest area to work on. So this is a close-up cow pen. We don't normally have this many close-up cows, but we are due to calve in way more than we normally do this month. So that's why it's a lot fuller than it normally is. But cows eat out of the H bunk here, wander around. They have sand beds in the back. And then this other portion of the barn is where the calving pens are. I can show you that too. So currently when they get ready to calve, we bring them into these pens here. There's a whole gate system in here we can actually make pens out of. And so we'll pen up, like we've got a calf there. I think she's getting ready to move out to the hutches. But we'll lock cows up in here so they can calve.